Welcome back, class. So we are talking about plants. We just discussed our bryophytes, or non-vascular plants. And next we're going to start talking about our vascular plants. Vascular plants are plants that have vascular tissue, and they are divided into the seedless, which don't have seeds, and the seed vascular plants, which do have seeds. So first we're going to talk about our seedless vascular plants. So when plants first evolved, bryophytes were the prominent vegetation, those non-vascular plants, for about 100 million years. Then after about 100 million years, about 425 million years ago, we started having the earliest vascular plants. The earliest fossils we have are from about 425 million years ago. By having vascular tissue, plants are able to start growing taller. The vascular tissue not only provides a way for nutrients and water to be taken to the top of a plant, but also provides some structure to support that plant to be able to stand up. And that provides a big benefit to a plant that is getting its energy from photosynthesis. When you are the tallest plant, nothing is blocking the sun. You have access to the sunlight. So vascular plants had this big benefit of greater access to sunlight. However, they were still restricted to moist habitats because they still needed sperm to swim to the eggs. The earliest vascular plants had independent branching sporophytes. That's what this picture is showing you. Today, living vascular plants are characterized by several features. One is a life cycle with a dominant sporophyte. This is different than we just talked about our bryophytes. Bryophytes have life cycles that are dominant gametophytes. In our vascular plants, their dominant structures are sporophytes. You probably would not even see a gametophyte unless you were down looking for it. And even in a lot of our vascular plants, the sporophytes are even going to be microscopic. Vascular plants have vascular tissues. So this is one characteristic that unites all vascular plants. And there's two types of vascular tissues, xylem and phloem. We'll come back and discuss that, but those are two important things to know. Two types of vascular tissues, xylem and phloem. Seedless vascular plants tend to have well-developed roots and leaves. There is one type of a seedless vascular plant that doesn't. We'll mention that. But for the most part, they are starting to have well-developed roots and leaves. So instead of just rhizoids, they're developing into actual roots. And their spore-bearing leaves are called sporophylls. Sporophylls are modified leaves that have sporangia on them. And a couple of vocabulary words that we may come back to, sori and strobili. Sori are clusters of sporangia on the underside of sporophylls, and strobili are cone-like structures formed from groups of sporophylls. So bryophytes have dominant gametophyte generations. So if you look at this, can you find where the gametophyte is? So the gametophyte would be here. But ferns and other leafy plants, the sporophyte generation is dominant. The sporophyte would be here, what produces a spore. The gametophytes are very small and underground. So here in a seedless vascular plant, this sporophyte generation is probably going to be not even bigger than your pinky fingernail. And they're typically underground. Small bisexual fern gametophytes called prothallus have both male and female gametangia, both antheridium and archegonia, and are able to fertilize like that.
Now let's see how the general plant life cycle is similar to the human life cycle. Cells in a diploid plant body undergo meiosis, resulting in haploid cells. Fertilization of a haploid egg cell by a haploid sperm cell results in a diploid zygote. The zygote undergoes mitosis and develops into a new diploid individual. But notice the gap between meiosis and production of gametes. This is where plant and animal life cycles differ. In plants, meiosis and structures called sporangia result in haploid cells known as spores. The diploid plant that produces spores is the sporophyte. A haploid spore undergoes many mitotic cell divisions and develops into a haploid multicellular individual. The sporophyte in this example is a fern, and the plant that develops from a fern spore is shown here. The new haploid multicellular plant is called the gametophyte because it produces gametes, egg and sperm cells. The gamete-producing structures are called gametangia. What process do you think occurs in the gametangia to produce egg and sperm cells? In the plant life cycle, unlike the human life cycle, gametes result from mitosis. This diagram summarizes the general plant life cycle. Plants are said to undergo an alteration of generations because the diploid sporophyte and haploid gametophyte are multicellular forms that occur alternately in the life cycle. Each form produces the other. All plants follow this same life cycle pattern, but each group of plants has certain variations. One variation is the relative size and longevity of the sporophyte and gametophyte. Notice that the fern sporophyte is much larger and longer lived than the gametophyte, which is about the size of the nail on your little finger. Another variation is whether the sporophyte and gametophyte live independently of each other. This is the case in ferns.
Okay, a next feature of vascular plants is vascular tissue. And vascular plants have two types of vascular tissue, xylem and phloem. So xylem is going to conduct water and minerals from roots up the plant. And this has tube-shaped cells called tracheids. One thing that's interesting about these cells is that as xylem cells develop, but by the time they are functionally mature and able to carry water up the plant, the cells are actually dead. So all they are doing at that point is just being a way to bring water up the plant. The xylem cells are also strengthened by the polymer lignin, which is a polymer that gives it strength and support and allows that plant to stand up. Then phloem, so I think of phloem with food, that f sound. Phloem are going to be tube cells that distribute food products, so sugars, amino acids, and organic products from leaves and tissues performing photosynthesis back down through the rest of the plant, down into the roots. Vascular tissue allows for increased height, which is an evolutionary advantage as taller plants get more sunlight. And also being taller means it's a little bit easier for those spores to disperse over longer distances. So those spores can travel to new areas that haven't been colonized by plants and have a competitive advantage to grow. As we start having vascular plants, we start having things like roots and leaves showing up. Roots are organs that are underground. They anchor vascular plants into the ground. They absorb water and they absorb nutrients from the soil. Early root tissues really closely resembled stem tissue in early vascular plants, and so it's very likely that roots evolved from below ground stems. Leaves are parts of a plant that increase surface area to allow light to be captured. Leaves where most photosynthesis in a plant are going to occur. And there's two different types of leaves, microphylls and megaphylls. Microphylls are small and spiny shaped, like you can see in this image, the little spiny shaped things. They're only found in lycophytes. Megaphylls are larger leaves. They're more branched. They have more branched vascular tissue in them, and they're found in all other plant groups. Most seedless vascular plants are going to be either homosporous or heterosporous. A homosporous plant means it has one type of sporophyll, one type of sporangium, and produces one type of spore. And that one type of spore will produce bisexual gametophytes. So the sporangium on the sporophyll produces one single type of spore, produces a typically bisexual gametophyte, which produces both eggs and sperm. All seed plants And some seedless vascular plants are heterosporous. They will produce megaspores and microspores. So megasporangium are produced on megasporophyll, produce megaspores, which is a female gametophyte that produces eggs. Microsporangium on microsporophyll give rise to microspores, which produce male gametophytes that produce sperm. So this is homosporous. These are heterosporous. Homospores produce eggs and sperm. Heterospores produce either megaspores that make eggs or microspores that make sperm. Our seedless vascular plants can be divided into two clades, the lycophytes and the monilophytes. And sometimes some of this is a little bit debated. So this is how your book talks about it. So this is how we're going to talk about it. Lycophytes are club mosses, spike mosses, and quillworts. Monilophytes are ferns, horsetails, and whisk ferns. Our lycophytes first, the club mosses, spike mosses, and quillworts. They grow in diverse habitats, mostly photosynthetic. Some of them form below ground symbioses with fungi. And the sporophytes have leaf-forming upright stems and ground-hugging root-forming stems. Monilophytes are ferns, horsetails, and whisk ferns and their relatives. Ferns are the most widespread seedless vascular plants, more than 12,000 species. The horsetails, at one point during their evolutionary history, these were richly dispersed. There were a lot of types of these plants. Now we just have really this one genus left, and then whisk ferns and their relatives. They're most diverse in the tropics. They also thrive in temperate forests and in arid habitats. So they have made a big impact on our climate. The ancestors of living seedless vascular plants and their relatives grew to great heights during the Devonian and early Carboniferous period. So this is a drawing of all seedless vascular plants. They're lycophyte trees. Today, lycophytes don't grow to this size, but at that point during the Devonian and early Carboniferous, they could. Here's horsetails, here's ferns. But as the climate dried out, only the smaller plants survived. So we only have the smaller ones living today. However, in their early forests, as they developed into forests, they dropped the carbon dioxide levels, which led to global cooling. And the seedless vascular plants that formed the first forest eventually became peat, which eventually turned into coal. So at this point, you should be able to list key derived traits found in monilophytes and seed plants, but not in lycophytes. So monilophytes are more closely related to seed plants than lycophytes. We talked about how they are similar to seed plants. What are the main similarities and differences between seedless vascular plants and non-vascular plants? And how do those similarities and differences affect function in these plants? And if fertilization occurred between gametes from one gametophyte, how would this affect the production of genetic variation from sexual reproduction? Okay, at this point, we have finished chapter 29, although in class, we'll cover chapter 29, and we're going to talk about fungi, chapter 31, together. So please make sure you come back for that. Just a very brief discussion of fungi. I'll see you soon, and please let me know if you have any questions. Bye.